All right, well, before we start, I just want to say that Alex is barred from weighing in on this discussion because I know he has many opinions, but we really don't want to hear any of them right now, so be quiet. Thank you so much, Michal and Daniel, for joining me on stage. And before we start, I'm wondering how many people here today drove in their private car to get here, if you could raise your hands. So, and then how many people were late because of traffic? Yeah, okay, thanks. Okay, well, a few number of them, because I know I was at least had a few meetings of folks who were late today because of traffic. So it is a timely conversation to be having. This is meant to be really exploring the idea of whether the private car is over or if it's ending. So I want to start off by asking you both to give me your position on the current state of the global car market. And Michal, maybe you can kick things off. Where are we at today?
I think it depends on the place that we are talking about. If we are talking about the urban cities, so absolutely yes. This is the end of the era of the private car. We already see in Europe, in many cities, in developed cities, that the use of public transportation is 50–60% use of public transportation. So the distance for getting rid of the private car is not that big. But in rural areas, I don't think there will be an end for the private car because it's not economic to go to other models. The evolving model is mobility as a service, in which we will use less our private cars, the ownership will decrease, and the use of the alternatives will rise. We already see it everywhere. For example, in Paris, only 13% of the motorized journeys are made by the private car. In Madrid, 25%. In Israel, by the way, it's different. 70% of the motorized journeys are made by a private car. So the situation varies from place to place.
Daniel, I'm wondering if you agree with that statement.
Well, you know, in many ways, I agree with Alex. In the sense that if we allow things to go the way they're going, then yes, we are going to have even higher levels of private car ownership because the next stage are these automated cars. They're not autonomous, by the way, because they're connected. And the English language says that if it's autonomous, it's not connected. So that's just correcting language here a little bit. But we will, if we follow the CEO of Skoda, if we follow what most of the people have been saying here, yes, we will end up with more private car ownership. And yes, we will have to pry that car away from people's death grip. And that is the direction we're going in. So I'll just say one thing. Mr. Agassi started us in the right direction here. And he started talking about sharing a vehicle, pooling. But where I think he missed the mark is it's not going to happen through the market. It's not going to happen by itself. And therefore, and that's the part where I would agree, is policy tells us everything about how we're going to get to a better future. So there's a distinction here between the public interest and the private interest. And if we're concerned about the public interest of climate change, traffic congestion, pollution, equity, then we better be rooting for more policy intervention.
So we can all root for that, right? But there are 278 million cars on the roads today in the world, which is a lot. And what Alex talked about earlier in his opening statement was that he knows all these things and yet he still owns 2 cars. So if in fact private car ownership is on its way out, what, Michal, do you think is driving that? What is actually the cause of it? Is it government? Is it economic?
So there are some factors that will make it or will make it not happen, and it depends on these factors. One is technology, and this already happens. If we see the big data, the AI, now there are technologies that were not existed in the past. Now we can know what people need based, and the mobility is personalized. Everyone can choose the alternative he wants based on these preferences. For example, the price, the physical mode, the age, the time, the price, everything. So this is a big change, and this leads to all the shared mobility, which I think is the core of the revolution, that people can share the way they move. The other thing is policy. If we look about the decades that have passed, everything was planned for the private car. And so we are not supposed to be surprised that now we are all addicted to the private car. But now it's changing. And if in more places we will have congestion fees and parking will begin to be priced, and there will be incentives for to share the rides and to improve the public transportation and also to change it so it will be easier to plan and to pay for the public transportation, then it all depends on the policy. And the third factor is just us. I think a big part of the change is depending on us. If we are from the auto tech industry, we really set an example and think every day, should I really don't have any choice but using my private car, or maybe I can try other modes? I think the moment we will see more and more managers and more politicians use different alternatives, that will bring the change.
Do you agree that technology, policy, and us is what's driving it right now?
I think there's a sign right up here that is really the most important message. Right up there, it says, I can't read it from here now, but it says, we need more choice. Because all these things we can say are great, but we've become, in all of the OECD rich countries of the world, we've become wedded to the car because the car is fabulous. It provides flexibility, freedom, security, safety. And now we're saying we're going to change that. That's really hard. So the problem we have is that we have that inertia, which has become the culture. And the problem we have now is almost no one is thinking strategically about how we change it. And what I mean, and I include many of the presentations we've had so far. And what I mean by that is that when we look at Uber, or when we look at the scooters, if you talk to a politician, a mayor, or even many common folks, they will say, you say Uber, they say traffic congestion. That's what we heard in the previous panel. You say scooters, they say clutter and danger. What they need to be thinking and saying is, Uber, aha, this is the door to the future. We are now conditioning people to get in strangers' cars. We are conditioning them to use an app. We are conditioning them to depend on all of the automated information and pricing that goes with it. But that's not what you hear. And so the first inclination of a mayor or city council should be, okay, how do we move to this better future? And I'll talk about the better future in a moment, but that's not the discussion. And for the most part, even here, the discussion has been about innovation and technology. And I think Michal is right. We need to be thinking it in a very different way, but I'll add to it, we need to be thinking strategically, where do we want to go?
Are you suggesting that local officials, people who live in cities, should merely be more patient with the pace of this, that Uber is the right start and that we're short-sighted by talking about congestion? Because that is a real problem, though, right? So is that what you're suggesting? Is it just a patience with it?
well, maybe patience, but maybe tolerance a little bit. But really the answer, okay, there's one, so I wrote a book, it's called Three Revolutions, by the way, which is a better use of words than case or ACEs. So think about that. The Three Revolutions: automation, sharing, electric. And so, you know, what we need, there's one word that I think sums up where we need to be going, and that's pooling. Some people would say sharing, but it really means multiple people in a vehicle. And that's what they should be thinking, that plus the scooters and bikes. But it's pooling and getting people, you know, in a vehicle, because as we move to automated vehicles, the inclination is going to be that you just buy an automated car instead of a manual car, and now you've got all more benefits. As someone said earlier, now we can spend all our time in the car, sleeping, reading, working, watching movies, and that is going to be really, you know, a catastrophe for urban areas. And so we need to condition the market now. We need the car companies to be designing the cars for multiple riders, make it passenger-centric, not driver-centric. So this represents a whole set of changes.
Michal, I'm wondering how you condition the market. As Daniel pointed out, how do you get people to share rides as opposed to doing what's happening oftentimes, which is single occupancy rides? They might not be driving the car, but they're the only ones riding in it. Does government have a role, or is, as Daniel said, really about patience and tolerance and encouraging and making this more of a choice?
It's both. So we are in the middle of the revolution already. We already see the changes, and they definitely agree that if the whole change would be just autonomous cars and electric cars, we will not have any change, not in congestion, not in quality of life. So the change has to be bigger than just the autonomous and the electric, which are big revolutions by themselves. So in order to have the whole revolution of the mobility as a service revolution, we need both the policy, the right incentives, and also like the punishments, and the incentives to use the other modes, and we need tolerance, because every new technology didn't go well from the beginning. There are many, many questions that rise, and we need to deal with all the challenges. For example, with the scooters and the use of the sidewalks, or even if it's Uber and the increase in the congestion. So there are ways to deal with all the challenges, and we need to find the right solution, the right regulation to deal with all of that. But I'm sure it will happen, and we need more tolerance for that.
So let me articulate that even more strongly. Let's follow Alex's vision of car ownership. It's disastrous because think of it this way. There he is going up.
He's jumping up now.
I thought you told him he can't
Yeah,
participate.
he can't participate.
It's a disaster because as we move towards making the vehicles more comfortable, automated, where we spend more time in the vehicle, that means more vehicle use, it means more energy use, it means even more traffic, it means even more equity problems because now the vehicles are even a little bit more expensive, and it's going to lead to an even further atrophying of public transportation. And so there's nothing, with all due respect, I know I'm really provoking you now, with all due respect, there's nothing good about it for the public interest. It's great for the individual. Wow, you know, you get this vehicle that takes you anywhere with just the press of a button. Who wouldn't want that?
And we pause for Alex, but we're not going to let him jump in. Well, I wonder, though, because I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs certainly here, and there's this idea that innovation technology will encourage people. But if you were a lawmaker, if you had the power to make any policy, what would it be to end or encourage the ending of private car ownership? And is that a good idea? Is there a place for policy right here? Because you were supporting it earlier, and I'm wondering what would it be? Would it be banning cars in urban centers? Would it be giving incentives to give up your car?
Yes. So first of all, let's don't blame the car industry, because I think they are doing the right thing. They understand that everything is changing, and they began investing in many companies and different technologies and solutions. So I think they are going on the right direction. Now it's the turn. The technology already does its job. Now it's the turn of the government to do the other job, and the public opinion also. It's as I said, it's a very important factor. So if we are talking about how to change the situation now, so there are few incentives that should be different. For example, road pricing is something that has to be in every crowded city. We cannot be away from it. If we are all take just Uber and use the car different, nothing will be changed. But if the use of the road, we will pay for it, that will be a way to look for other modes of transportation and to share our mobility ways. Also, reducing the parking areas in the cities. If the parking will be for free, as it now in many places, so why not to use the car if everything is so cheap? On the other hand, we need good alternatives. For example, advanced public transportation that will be efficient and reliable and cheap and will get us fast from place to place, that we can plan and pay everything in one place. So this can be a great change. And also to open all the kinds of mobility alternatives, such as scooters and bikes and TNCs and shared and carpooling. All the incentives for that can do a big change.
So you could make a law today. What would it be? And is there an environmental angle there too, because of your experience at CARB?
Yeah, you didn't tell him I'm actually a regulator as well. I guess Alex was referring. Alex told you. So, we are the agency in California that requires zero-emission vehicles, low-carbon fuels, carbon cap and trade, and a lot more. And so I do have that experience as a regulator. Now, looking at it from a policy perspective, what we've learned is you can't change things right away. There's huge investments, there's a lot of inertia, there's institutions that need to be changed. So everything, I'm an optimist, but the vision I'm laying out, actually, I appreciate will take a long time to actually be realized. And so this is an incremental, but I said earlier, we need to think strategically so that the decisions that we do make are heading us in the right direction, and that is making it easier to use scooters, providing the incentives for pooling. So, okay, pooling idea.
Right.
Here's some ways to do it.
Don't give away a free idea because someone here might start a company. Just
I go for it. Okay. I just want a little small commission. No, the idea is that, okay, here's a simple way to start. Airports. I also had one of those experiences at the airport with Get. But make it so that if that a taxi or a car that comes to the airport, if it's picking up several people, it pays no fees and it gets to go right to the curb. If it's only bringing one passenger or picking up one passenger, then they got to go park way out in the boondocks and they have to pay a large fee. Okay? That is starting to condition this market towards this idea of pooling, and when I say sharing, I mean multiple riders. And we can start doing in the cities. There's lots of things that we can do in terms of curb space. You let pooled cars get better access than you do cars that just have a single passenger or a single driver. And so there's a list of these kinds of things, and Many of them are in my book, by the way. But seriously, there are many of these, and I think that's something we all need to be working out because, as Mikhail said, it does vary from city to city, country to country. But a lot of the basic ideas are encourage choice. That's number one. Encourage choice, because until there's choice, you can't adopt the policies. And so that's why the scooters and the bikes and the bike paths and the Ubers and the Olas and the Didis are all a good idea. And the second one is then start introducing some of these incentives and disincentives to push us in that direction.
So a bit of a carrot and stick approach. And so I wonder, should we be applying that to automakers? Should automakers be doing more than they're doing today to essentially cannibalize their business or somehow shift into something different that will produce the same amount of revenue? Because potentially if they stop selling private cars, they could see their business.
They will sell something else. It's not a cannibalization because this is different modes of investment, and then they can sell more services if they will be part of giving the services of the mobility as a service model. And some of the car manufacturers already do it. Take example, Daimler, who invests in so many projects and is doing great job. So the market will do it by itself. We don't need to expect them. We just need to expect more from our politicians to look at the long-term distance and not only the upcoming year or two, and that will make the change.
So do you think that automakers are already doing something?
Well, that's why these signals are important. This is a huge opportunity for the car industry, but they're not going to go in the direction we're talking about unless they are guided. Because right now, the inclination, as the CEO from Skoda said, really their inclination is just to keep putting more technology in the car, make it a little more automated, not driverless, but what we call level 4 or level 3 self-driving, because then they're just still selling the cars to the private car market. So what they need to be thinking about is really a transformation of the industry, a transformation of transportation. And then, maybe they'll sell a few less cars, but yes, there's still going to be vehicles. But more than that, what we're talking about is creating massive new industries that are going to operate all these vehicles, it's going to be a it's going to be a business. Right now, we drive our own cars, and so we don't get compensated. Now we're creating a business where these cars are owned by a mobility service company, and you've got all of the dollars that are going to go into operating the vehicles, managing the vehicles, running the companies, customer care. There's huge opportunities, and some of the car companies are thinking about it a little, but are very nervous. And even within that, I spent a long conversation with a director from BMW, and we came to the understanding that there's a niche for BMW or Mercedes, because even with these pooled cars, some people are going to be willing to pay more. Some people are going to want a nicer vehicle, a nicer service, and and that's a niche for a luxury company. So there's a role for all of them. They just need a little help.
So it sounds like you think that automakers, or you both think that automakers are going to become less of a commodity builder and more of a service industry. To sort of end this, one thing we haven't talked about and just want to hear briefly from both of you is the role of public transit and whether there are opportunities to privatize it, to have startups like Via, for example, doing on-demand, working with cities to provide on-demand transit. What is the role in this? Because without choice, as you say, you'll just essentially, if you take away the private car, you're just eliminating the person's ability to get around if there isn't an alternative. So what's the role of public transit in there, and should it be privatized? Is there an opportunity there?
we have to make sure that we all understand that public transportation, the classic public transportation, is the core of this revolution. Mobility as a service, in the middle, it's the public transportation. All the other modes are just completed. So if you are looking about TNCs like Uber or Lyft, they're not competing the public transportation. People who move from the private car to use TNCs will also use more the other alternatives such as TNCs, public transportation, cycling, and even walking. So it's all complete each other. And this is the thing, I just want to go to two examples. I think the public is really ready to adopt the other alternatives. Let's take, for example, Manhattan, the Times Square. A few years ago, it was the most crowded, one of the most crowded places in the world, so much noise, so many cars, and in one day they decided to change and just close the roads for a few months just to do an experiment. It succeeds so well, and after a few months they decided we don't need cars anymore here, and the public was really in favor of it. Another example is the cycling in the Netherlands. 61% of the journeys is made by cycling, by bikes in the Netherlands. Why did it happen like that? It was not always like that. In the 70s, everything started changing, and the government started having so many more bike lanes, and people just moved from using the cars to cycling. And that's the example how to have the change.
All right, take us home, Daniel.
Okay, very quickly. Yes, conventional legacy transit is very important, the best way to move large numbers of people from one place to another, but it needs to be transformed, and the way it needs to be transformed, it doesn't have to be privatized. In fact, I think it's better not to, but it needs to partner and collaborate with private mobility services. And so a flip side of that is the Ubers of the world need to learn how to partner with public transportation in a way that public transportation finance, services, how they're integrated together, the pricing, it's all integrated together. But that requires a transit operator with a lot more capacity than what is typical in the world. It requires political leadership to support it. There's union issues and a lot more. But really, that has to be the vision. It is the only way forward that is going to lead to major transportation benefits, smart mobility.
Great. Well, thanks so much. So next year when we come here, we'll see all sorts of startups dedicated to this idea, hopefully. All right. Well, thank you so much.